Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel where we're doing YA debuts. There's a little bit of a mix. So when I was starting to write the title, I was like, wait, actually, it's completely just YA debuts. I'm really excited to be chatting with everyone. I've also read the books. This is like a fun mix of all books that have been released. So it means that everyone can get a copy now, but it also means that we can like have a chat about what has been in the books. There won't be any spoilers, but just in case anyone was wondering. My name is Lily. I'm the moderator for the panel. I'm kind of like the face behind Utopia State of Mind on the internet. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat. We will get back to them towards the end. And I'm going to have our lovely panelists introduce themselves so that we can hear about their books and then also get into the questions that I've have when I was reading all of these books. So Ananya, do you want to start first?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Ananya Devarajan. I'm the author of Kiss My Connection, which is my debut young adult romance novel, and it came out in June of this year, so it's been out for about 3 months now. So I write books that are YA romances, obviously, but they're really centered around the Indian American experience, about falling in love with someone from your own culture, even if that isn't necessarily something you might have expected growing up. And it's a huge emphasis on family and speculative elements throughout all of my romance novels. So I think that's also a big facet of it too. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be part of this panel.
Trang, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So, hi, everyone. My name is Trang Phan Tran, and I am the author of She is a Haunting, which is a YA horror novel about a Vietnamese American girl who visits her estranged father in Vietnam and discovers that the French colonial house that he's renovating has sinister plans for her family. I describe it a little bit like Mexican Gothic meets The Astonishing Color of After. It has themes of, coming out, feeling like you're an outsider and you don't fit anywhere and you're in between spaces. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Maya?
My name is Maya Mayao, and my debut, When It All Syncs Up, came out in on June 6th with Anik Press. So just some themes from When It All Syncs Up, dealing with being a person of color in ballet, as well as dealing with mental health issues and trying to find yourself, and also found family is a big theme as well. So that's a little bit about my book.
KX?
Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. So my name is KX Song, and my debut is An Echo in the City. It is set during the 2019 Hong Kong protests, and it is about Kai, who is a police officer in training from Shanghai, and Phoenix, who is a student protester in Hong Kong. And the two meet when Kai is assigned to spy on Phoenix due to her involvement in the student protests. But of course, nothing goes as planned.
And then Jackie, do you want to round us off?
Hi, I'm Jackie. I'm the author of Something More, which came out on June 6th as well. It's a YA contemporary romance featuring a autistic Palestinian Canadian girl who receives an autism diagnosis just weeks before starting high school. It has themes of coming of age, coming to terms with her new autism diagnosis, a loud Arab family, a love triangle, and a lot of messiness that you would expect from your first year of high school.
Yeah, so as I've mentioned before, all of the books are out, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I normally don't get to do that. I feel like normally the panels have like books that haven't been released yet, so it's nice to focus on a little bit of the post-debut feels. I would love to know, what has it been like post-debut? Anything surprising or unexpected that you might have encountered? And also, like, how was, your debut? How was release? So Ananya, do you want to start, and then everyone can jump in after that?
Sure, yeah. I had a really lovely debut experience, I would say. I feel like I got very lucky to have a team and a publishing imprint that really, helped me succeed because I think that's something an author can't always do on their own. So I got to go on tour, which was exciting. I was promoting Kiss My Connection in New York and California. I got to go to ABA and meet booksellers throughout promoting my book, and I just really think it was an incredible experience. But probably the most surprising is that incredible feeling that you're feeling throughout tour does go away a little bit after a week, and it goes away very fast. And I think what was surprising is being kind of faced with the whole, you remember what your dream was before the tour, before you got the book deal, and really holding on to that dream so you can write the next book and keep writing books after that, so that you're not really measuring your success on external metrics, but rather who wanted to write the book in the first place. Did you get that dream? And for me, my dream was always to get Kismet Connection in the hands of a 14-year-old Indian girl who was struggling with her identity. And that happened. So I feel really grateful now, but that was a 3-month healing process after debut. And I think everyone tells you that when you're about to debut, but it's another thing to actually experience it. But I think that was most surprising.
Someone was telling me that the debut experience is kind of like a wedding, except you don't have to have a partner, but it's like people from every aspect of your life like coming to celebrate you and like your accomplishment of a book. And like, when else will that happen for people who are not authors? So for me, it was a little bit like a wedding. And I would say that one highlight was actually an unexpected one. So my book came out in the UK in August, and it was a very unplanned thing that it sort of happened very quickly. And normally publishing deals happen many years before the book comes out, but actually the UK deal happened only a few months before. And then when I went out to the UK, meeting the Hong Kong diaspora out there was just an incredible experience. And, being able to see the people who this book is centering and just like hearing about their experiences, how it matched up with the book and how it also didn't match up with the book was really inspiring for me.
It's funny that you mentioned the whole concept of having a book coming out be like a wedding, because I had thought that as well, because it's just like, when do you have all the people in your life coming together to celebrate you in this specific, I don't know, I felt like kind of similar. And I just thought it was kind of like an interesting thing, because like if I were ever to get married, it would be like a terrifying experience just because of the attention. It's just like, I don't want that many people just like, okay, like we're all the attention's on you. And it's like with a book, it's even more specific to you because you wrote the book. So it was really interesting when I debuted, because like I'm an introvert, but I like attention. So it was just like, we had the book launch, and I was like excited about it, very nervous about it, but it's just like a lot of very conflicting emotions around me wanting to share and talk about my characters and all that stuff, but also being like, I do not want to ever be received in my life. So it's a big mix for me in terms of the actual debut day. But pre-debut and like post-debut, I feel like there's just a lot of social media stuff that went into pre-debut, and then post-debut, I kind of burnt myself out. I had to take a little bit of a break. So I think just pacing yourself is kind of like the one thing that I would take away from that.
I had a really similar experience to Nanya, where like, you had this dream, and it's to get this book published and get into the hands of the readers, right? And then it happens, and then afterwards it's like, what now? So like your relationship to writing, your relationship to, having a readership and the art that you're creating changes. And I felt like that was probably the most challenging part post debut is, really considering like what else do I want out of my writing life, and what kind of books do I want my readers to read from me next. So that has been like sort of like on my mind and like driving myself bananas as I'm working on my second book. But overall, my debut experience was really wonderful and really great. And it's really surprising like how my family has come around to writing as a career now that there's like a physical book that they can hold.
I guess I would liken it to an emotional roller coaster. It was a lot of high highs and some really low lows, and a lot of asking, what now? There's so much build up. And then even the month of debut, I was pretty busy. I had some events that I had to go to. And as it's quieted down, I'm currently struggling with how much do I still need to talk about my book? How much do I need to promote it? How often do I need to be present online? Because people quickly forget if you're not constantly reminding them about the book. And in my experience, I don't feel like my book has reached its audience yet. So I'm still trying to find my readers. And somebody said this to me and it really resonated. A lot of people or a lot of authors will do a lot leading up to the release. And then, we often burn out and sort of disappear. But somebody said, now that you have this tangible thing that people can actually buy, now is the time to talk about it because there's a call to action. So I am trying to find that balance between still showing up, but not annoying people, because I'm always worried that I'm going to annoy people. But it's also like, if I don't do it, then who will? That's the position I'm currently in.
Yeah, I want to sort of elongate, I don't know if that's the right word, but follow a thought that Trang was saying earlier, which leads into my next question, was the debut book process kind of informing your career as a writer, your dreams. We've talked everyone's kind of talked a little bit about how it's kind of changed their perspective. So I would love to know how you all think the debut book process has informed or changed maybe the book writing process, maybe even for you, or how you view like all of the above, right? So writing, craft, publishing, like etc. And Trying to want to start since you like last said that.
Yeah. So I feel like, when you're just starting out, it's like you're in your room, in your dark room, writing your little unhinged stories with your unhinged characters, doing things. And you're just putting all of your joy into it and like all these things, right? To write the story that you want. And then that gets picked up or it gets published. And now you're faced with the question like, oh, well, now people are either expecting this similar thing from me, or like I have to think about what my brand is. And I feel like that's really difficult to think about, like, because, we all want to be authentic in our stories and tell stories that, say something emotional or something, true. Right. And so I felt like that was a really hard balance, is afterwards like, well, I have to deliver a story that readers of She is a Haunting is going to enjoy. Right. And so I felt like I had to figure out like what makes me happy when I'm writing, and what do I really need as a writer? Or do I want it as a career, right? Because if you're writing it for a career, it's a little bit different than writing it, as a side job, for example. And that's something I've really had to think about in the last year. Like, what do I want with my books?
I can jump in here as well, because I think also as an author, there's so much lead up once you get your book deal to when the book comes out, right? And then there's even more lead up until the second book comes out. And in that time, so much time has passed, and we are human beings, so our voice has changed. So I think for me, the debut process in turning writing a career, I have a pretty unique experience in the sense of my first book I wrote when I was 17. So Kiss My Connection has the voice of a 17-year-old. And now I'm 21, almost 22, and that's a big shift in my maturity and my voice, and my writing is very different, even if I had the same themes of Kiss My Connection in book 2. So that's been something I've been grappling with, because it's almost like you don't fully sound like yourself, or you don't sound like the brand that your now audience kind of expects you to be. You have the same themes, but it's being executed in a very different way that comes with a change in age. So for me, making writing, I guess, a career has been finding constants, finding those themes that I want to bring out in every single book as like something for readers and audiences to fall back on, no matter what I change or how I change. But kind of being a little bit okay with the fact that my writing style is developing in a very exponential way as I get older in such a pivotal time. And that's inevitably going to come out in the writing. And hopefully it still resonates, even if it's drastically different from Kiss My Connection's 17-year-old voice, right?
I think for me, something I didn't expect, and I'm still trying to find the right balance again, is that now I hear voices. I know what people think. And it's hard sometimes to not let those negative voices affect your future work. Because I have this theme where people have complained about my main character, Jesse, being boy crazy. So I was just like, okay, so maybe I need to scale that back in my other books. But my critique partner was like, no, don't change that, because that's going to be the thing that draws you into certain readers. And if you change for the people that don't like your book, you're never going to please those people. So instead of trying to listen to the negative voices and try to make them happy, I'm trying to lean into the things that my readers who do like my style of writing and my characters, and lean into those things and not change those things. And that's not something we had before, right? Like we had beta readers and critique partners and editors, but hearing what the general public thinks about your book can really mess with your mind a little bit if you let it. So there's definitely an adjustment period that I think debut authors have and will have to adjust to, what to take from that, because sometimes we can learn from it, and what to keep for ourselves.
Completely agree with you, Jackie. I feel like as a debut author, you're often advised not to look at reviews, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Reviews are just sometimes in your face without you asking them to be. So being aware that, yeah, like she was saying, just kind of like knowing that there is a danger there of putting too much stock into what other people are thinking, and then also balancing that with where you are now as an author. And that often is a very different place, like was mentioned, than when you first wrote your book in terms of where you are mentally. So yeah, it is kind of like this towing that line between being able to put other people's opinions out of your mind and staying true to your own vision for what you want to do next. And hopefully that aligning with what your brand is. But, you know, your brand can evolve as you evolve.
My experience was a bit different because I sort of did everything backwards, but by accident. So I've always loved speculative fiction. I've always been a huge fantasy reader, but then somehow An Echo in the City, which is a YA contemporary, was the book that sold. And so I became a YA contemporary author. But then I had already written a adult fantasy. And so that is actually the book that is coming out next summer. And that one was written before An Echo in the City came out. So it was sort of always in the works, but not really public at that point. It's a huge departure from Echo. So I don't anticipate, some readers may enjoy themes of Echo in The Night Ends with Fire, but it also may attract a different readership too, and that's totally okay. I would say for me, it was sort of, going through the books that I've already written and the ones that are slated for the future, and trying to figure out like what are the connecting themes or characters or settings that sort of unite my different pieces of my work and my overall body of work. And that sort of became like what I wanted my brand to be. What I noticed is that I really enjoy themes of collective memory and history and the way that history shifts with each retelling. And that's a bit abstract, but when you bring it down to a more on the ground level, you can start to see how the books all connect. And then that was like a aha moment for me, where it also helped inform my future works too, where now that I know what themes really attract me and compel me, I can start to draw out those threads in my future novels and make me more excited to write them as well.
Yeah, I love what everyone is saying. I feel like when, for people who don't know a lot about the publishing process, when a book has been released, there have been so many years, months, like so many people behind it that like the person that we are at that moment is like the person that was whatever the person knew 6-10 years ago, sometimes even for some people. And I think that can get kind of lost for average readers who might not understand like all of the steps and everything that has to go into the book, and are looking for like a direct, this is how people feel right now kind of thing. I want to talk a little bit about some books in depth. Also, by the way, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I want to start off with my first question is the family and When It All Syncs Up and Kisma Connection are huge parts of your book as your characters explore their feelings towards their family throughout the book. I think it like can change and evolve, for your main characters. So I wanted to know from both of you, did you have any unexpected challenges while drafting the family aspect or like the family characters? And who is your favorite family member and why? Maya, do you want to start?
For sure. So yeah, the family aspect in When It All Syncs Up is a contentious one sometimes because of the fact that the main character, she's a dancer and she has a typical dance mom. So it can be really difficult for her in terms of dealing with certain expectations that her mom has for her. Her dad is more relaxed and just kind of like wants what she wants type of thing. So it's just kind of like the main character navigating mainly her mother's wants and needs from what she actually wants, and then trying to separate herself from some of the stuff that has gone on between her parents because of what she does and her blaming herself for that as well. So in terms of characters that I really enjoyed writing with the family, so I would say probably her dad. I did really enjoy his character. He's kind of like a jokester type of character. He tries to like lighten the mood. And a lot of times where like the main character Aisha is very stressed out, even though he doesn't live near her, he does have a very close relationship with Aisha, and I think that relationship is very grounding for her and like very healthy. And he kind of encourages her to like talk about her mental health where she's more resistant, and that eventually helps her to be able to heal from some of the things that happened as a result of her trauma being in the dance world.
Oh, okay, sorry. So just going off the family and Kisma Connection. No, you're good. You're good. There's a little bit of a lag on my end, so I wasn't sure. I didn't want to cut you off, but so Kismet Connection has two juxtapositioning kind of families. So there's Arjun's family and there's Madhuri's family. And Madhuri's family is a trope that I really wanted to subvert when it comes to Indian American coming of age stories in popular media, which is that you have this main character who is consistently at odds with her parents because her parents refuse to meet her halfway, and that's not representative of all Indian families. I come from an Indian family that's been highly supportive of everything I've ever wanted to do and has very much been my best friends through every stage of my life. So I wanted to write that, and I wanted to make that a little bit more mainstream when we're talking about Indian American family dynamics. So that was not a challenge for me to write because Madhuri's family is essentially a reflection of my own in the best possible way. Arjun's family was very difficult to write though, because I've never really seen up close and personal, thank God, a family that is so difficult to be with. Arjun is consistently ignored. He's financially privileged in the sense that his parents will give him anything he wants monetarily, but he's not getting love and affection from them. He's not getting quality time from them. He's not getting what really matters when it comes to your relationship with your family, and that very much impacts the way that he falls in love. And so there are trust issues there. There are abandonment issues there. And he's falling in love with a woman who's always had her family and cannot begin to wrap her mind around why you would ever ask for love because she's just always been given it to her. So I think that creates a really interesting relationship dynamic, but it was definitely a challenge to establish those juxtapositioning family ideals. But I will say my favorite character has to be Auntie Iyer. I think there's something so funny about leaning into the astrology obsessed horoscope mom trope. I think it's just fun when you have this really stubborn, angry teenage girl who loves her mom, even when her mom is like, your life is going to suck. The stars are telling me your life is going to suck, and now you have to believe me. And her first response is, Mom, you're so lame. That's not how the world works. So I thought it created a really interesting dynamic and a lot of humor in the book. So I found that very fun.
The next question I have is for She is a Haunting and An Echo in the City. And I love how Cake's already kind of talked a little bit or hinted a little bit at the history element, because I think both of those books navigate history, family history, the history of where we're from. And I would love to know from both of you if you could talk about how it was as an author to explore the meaning of the history in your books, and how did you see the main character's story structure evolving as it interacted with history? When I was writing that question, it like made total sense to me, but I basically just I hope that that made sense to everyone else. And I would love to hear just about like how your characters are grappling, navigating, exploring history throughout the course of the book. So, Kix, do you want to start because you talked a little bit about history before?
Yeah, so for An Echo in the City, the Hong Kong protest took place in 2019. So it's less history and more contemporary news. But I would say that it's very related. When I was in Hong Kong in 2019 and seeing what was happening on the ground, it was a very different experience from what I was reading in the international English media. And then when I went back to Shanghai, where I also have family, it was jarring to hear the differences in how the mainland Chinese media portrayed these events. There's very much, one side of the story that's being told in media, but that's also because media has such limited space. And I feel like the reason why I love novels is because you can really get that nuance and depth to a story that you can't really get in other mediums or forms. And so my aim in writing An Echo in the City was to give a bit more nuance to a situation that I felt most Western readers weren't too familiar with, and to showcase more than one side of the story. In terms of writing about history, though, I struggled with this at first because, fiction is what I want to write at the end of the day. Like, I'm a storyteller, not a historian. But actually, in my first draft of the novel, every single event that takes place in the narrative takes place at the same time and on the same timeline as the real life event in history. So, for example, a major protest, 2 million people came out, would happen on day X. And then 2 months would pass where nothing happened. And then another, important event would occur. And my editor helped me clarify, what are your aims in writing this book? Because while this is now a historically accurate novel, it's also a boring novel and the pacing is really slow. So do you want to tell a story to entertain or to inform? And I would say while those two goals are not always, entirely at odds, I had to, ask myself, like, do I want to write a story that is satisfying for readers, or one that will, be able to help them know exactly which dates happened? And what I thought is there are many nonfiction novels or books out there about the Hong Kong protests, but I wanted to tell a story that could help readers understand these characters, their motivations, their dreams, their hopes and fears. And so that's why I ended up shrinking the timeline. So now the entire book takes place over 1 month, and then having a much faster, pacing and timeline of the story.
So for She is a Haunting, I had to deal with the same thing where I was like, am I telling a story that is, historically accurate, or am I telling a story to sort of entertain within the parameters of history, right? And my aim has always been to tell a story that entertains. I wanted to play with Gothic horror tropes. Gothic horror is all about, the past that's haunting the present, these decadent settings with things that are hidden underneath. And I wanted to do that. And I want to do that with a house in Vietnam that has this rich history of, French colonialism and the people who were mistreated there. But the main driver for me was, who gets to be remembered in history. I was particularly inspired, by the fact that, like both my grandparents spoke French. Because they were born in 1920s or late 1918. So they both spoke French, but they never really spoke about that experience to me, right? And so, because they lived under French colonialism. And so, like, there's so many parts of our personal histories that we don't know about because it's difficult to talk about, or just, the lost records over time. So in my book, it's really about this very personal family history, this family being really driven by the fact that they don't know a lot of things in the past, and where they came from, and what places they have occupied. And so they're trying to make a place now. And in terms of how this sort of the story structure changed over time. So in She is a Haunting, there's actually two point of views. Most of the chapters are from Jade's point of view, which is a 17-year-old girl. And then the other point of view is actually from the haunted house. The haunted house has a point of view. And so a lot of times you see the push and pull between, what the house is doing to get what it wants and what Jade is doing to get what she wants. But as you see, as they're kind of crossing over and influence each other, like Jade's point of view changes as well. And so her narrative becomes, very like fast paced towards the end, where it's like sort of chaotic. And also the fact that she realizes that there are more commonalities between her and her father, who she has a very difficult relationship because of this history that they share.
Yeah, I love the idea of education and entertainment, and then the interplay between them at various times throughout like the life of a book. Um, and my final question is regarding Something More. And I think one of the themes that really stuck with me when I read Something More was how Jesse explores friendships, specifically also like difficult ethical choices that your friends can kind of make you pick between or make you kind of have an opinion on. Um, and also how you repair trust, which is like a huge theme, basically. So I'd love to know if you could talk about Jesse's emotional growth and journey in the book in relationship to the friendships, because I think that theme interacted really wonderfully with how, all of us can become so fixed on a vision we have for like our life and our relationships that we have around us, and, the loves in our life. So yeah, I would just love to hear about that.
Sure. I really did want to have friendship be a big theme in the story because when we meet Jessie, she admits that she's never really had any deep friendships. And as she's coming to terms with this diagnosis, in the beginning of the book, she's not coming to terms with it. There's one end where it feels sort of a relief and validating to understand that, okay, there's a reason why I've always felt different, but also I want to go into high school and have my fresh start. I don't want people to judge me for who I used to be. And I don't want this diagnosis to stop them from getting to know the me that I want to be. So I think there was a lot of push and pull with her. There's this part of her that wants to be the idealized version of herself so that she can be the best friend that she can be and have these friendships. But then there's a part of her that's like, well, why aren't these people behaving the way that makes sense to me? Because, when you're an autistic person, you think very black and white. And she really is challenged through the story with a lot of, like you said, ethical decisions. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's 3 girl friendships that she has in the story. And, there's secrets and lies and, her brain is telling her, well, it should be, this is the right, this is wrong, and this is how I should react. But when the emotions are tied up and other people's feelings are tied up and her worrying about how they're going to react to her, it becomes really stressful. And it was for me as well in high school. I didn't know I was autistic, but I did go into 9th grade wanting my fresh start because I hadn't been able to connect with anyone in elementary school. And so I really tried to be perfect, the quiet, listening friend. But I also was really challenged and stressed because I would absorb their moods and I would try and say the right thing, but never knowing what the right thing to say was. So it really was a big theme in the story. And as the story progresses and Jessie comes more into her own and understanding herself and her needs and her boundaries, then the friendships start to evolve. And some of them evolve and some of them stall, like they do in real life.
Yeah, you have those times where like someone asks you for advice or like they ask you for your opinion, but it's very clear they don't want your opinion. They want like whatever they want to hear, like parroted back to them. I think that is reading about that in Something More was like validating and frustrating, and like basically all of those like pieces of the emotional puzzle. By the way, also, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. I think it's really clear from our panel that representation and telling a variety of different stories is incredibly important. So I'd love to hear from everyone if you could talk about your experiences with your book, because I love asking this. I think that growing up for me was such a huge, like, not being able to find these stories and not being able to find like everyone's books on this panel today. I know, Ananya, you talked a little bit about it in your intro, so I'd love for you to start us off.
Sure, yeah. I've definitely talked a little bit about there's different forms of representation of Kismet Connection because I was being a bit ambitious in all the things I wanted to tackle in the Indian American diaspora. The biggest one being the family dynamics of you can have a supportive, empathetic, open-minded Asian parent who does not, hurt you for not being exactly what they deem the model child. And I think that model of an Indian American family needed to be seen, at least for popular media to not necessarily think there is only one way to be an Asian American parent. So that was one big thing. But for me, representation does come in the form of my main character, Madhuri. I think growing up, I've always read books about these Indian girls who are just perfect. And they are so smart and they're so beautiful and they're so talented and they could do whatever they wanted and have whatever they wanted and they'd be quiet and grateful the whole time. And as an Indian American who did not grow up like that, who maybe could get everything she wanted, but would always do it by being stubborn and fighting and angry and kind of needed the love of the people around her to validate that it's okay to not be perfect all the time, I kind of really wanted to write a character like that, a character that you maybe may not like on the surface level. And then as you get to know her, as you understand that she is multidimensional, she's not just her grades, she's not just her family, she is a real life woman with a lot of anger and a lot of past trauma that does bleed into her day-to-day life. Maybe you can love her the way the people in her life love her. So for me, that was a big part of the representation I wanted to show. I think angry Indian American women are my favorite trope in media recently. I just love seeing it, and I love seeing these cinnamon roll boys love them unconditionally in spite of everyone else's opinion of them. So I was really passionate about that. I think that came through in when I was writing Madhuri. She is a bit of a polarizing character, though, as a result, where people will not necessarily follow through to the end of the book to see her journey, but she isn't for everyone, and that is the whole point of her character. So I feel like I've done a good job in representing her, even if maybe not everyone likes her.
I love an angry character. I love that. Jade in She is a Haunting is also very angry, and that's something that I went into knowing that I wanted to write. Someone who wanted to be perfect on the surface, but had all of this anger and all of this hurt underneath. For me, I was also writing within a genre, horror, in which I didn't see many Asian characters survive or in them at all. And like, how can you be the final girl in a story in which you don't exist, right? And so I very purposely wanted to write a final girl who is Vietnamese, who is bisexual, who is all these things that you might not have seen before, and dealing with issues that maybe haven't been explored before or as much in horror, issues of, different family dynamics, of the past haunting the present. So I really went into it knowing that I wanted a very specific family story to come out and also a very specific girl to emerge as the final girl. And that's someone who is angry, someone who's in between spaces, but finally learning to claim, what is hers.
Representation is a really interesting question. And I definitely, when I was going into writing An Echo in the City, wanted to represent two very different voices who have very different perspectives on the Hong Kong protests, which were very polarizing. So one character is from mainland China and one is from Hong Kong. And I think one of the most surprising things that I've learned after debut is that it is completely random and there is no trend or pattern in terms of who my readers have a favorite character for. Like, I would say 50% say that Phoenix is their main character or favorite character, and then 50% say Kai. Like, there really is no common denominality there. And why that is, I think it's because they're so different, and also they speak to very different readers too. Like Kai is someone who's very introverted, who feels more comfortable being in the corner of the room. He's prone to melancholy and angst, versus Phoenix is kind of your classic YA protagonist. She's very bold, impulsive, a bit reckless too, but someone who's very much like, singing at the KTV, like the loudest person in the room. And I actually had a friend who is from mainland China, and he said, I just started skipping Phoenix's chapters and only reading Kai's. And I thought that was so funny to me. But actually, like, I didn't really mind, because this person from mainland China, like, he does not normally see himself in literature. And he found a character who he really relates to, and his perspectives are aligned there. And so through this experience, he was able to read a book and enjoy it, while he's not a huge reader normally. So I would say that even though people see themselves in different characters, at the end of the day, like, it's still just a novel that you're reading. And I'm glad for people to be able to relate to some characters and perhaps not others as much.
Maya didn't get her turn. Should we go back to Maya, or?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I lost connection for a bit, but hopefully you guys can hear me now. Can you guys hear me? Or
Yeah,
not?
we can hear you. Yeah, sorry. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so yeah, I talked a little bit about this during a panel that I had for my launch with Jackie. Just the fact that there are so many different cultures that don't have themselves represented. And I feel like it's weird that media makes it a very, like, literally black and white issue of just like, oh, white people are represented and then black people aren't represented, when it's like, there's more people besides black and white people who have a lot of different cultures who would like to see represented. And my experience of, like, if my culture was represented, it was in probably a stereotypical role that I didn't think was representative of me or the people that I knew. So, and that being something that was represented in the fiction that I was reading, and wanting to see something different. So there have been so many amazing authors who have background similar to mine, who have gotten their YA stuff published, but it's been recent. Like, before I graduated high school, I didn't see any of the YA books about people who look like me. So it's only been in the last few years that I've seen that. So I'm just really excited to be involved in, like, maybe there's some person who has my identity who was like, I'm really looking for a book that has this type of character. I haven't seen it in this specific way represented. And because it has been so marginalized for so long, it might be one of the first representations that they've seen. So that is a really special experience.
There was zero representation for Palestinian girls growing up. The only representation there were for my people was negative. And so it's been a long time coming. And I think with that, there's been I sometimes feel this big responsibility to have the perfect rep, but I cannot give that. All I can give is my experience. For one, most Palestinians are of Muslim faith, but I'm Christian. So, I think some Palestinians go into the book really excited to see a Palestinian girl, and there might be some disappointment that, the religions aren't the same. I've had some Palestinian readers maybe uncomfortable with the romance aspect, but, I've had to say, Jessie's not breaking any rules of Islam because she's Christian. She's breaking her parents' rules, but she's not breaking any religious rules. The other challenge with that is, there's been autistic girls have also been severely misrepresented or have been shown in a very stereotypical way. And I think there are readers that are excited to read my book because of that. But the challenge is I, once again, can only share my experience. And some people don't like to see characters who don't fit the stereotypical mold that you're used to. They're uncomfortable with it. Another challenge I have is that I am writing a character with intersectional rep. And that makes it harder, I think, for people to connect with the character or even to pick up the book, because they're going to see, okay, maybe I can get behind a Palestinian girl, but oh, she's autistic. That's two things that disconnect me, and I'm not going to be able to see myself in her. But one of the most common pieces of feedback I do receive is how relatable Jessie is and how surprised people are by that. And then I sort of like flip the question around. I'm like, why are you so surprised that this autistic Palestinian girl is relatable to you? I think that's a question that readers need to look inside. Is it because they've othered us so much that they didn't expect to be able to relate to a girl who is both autistic and Palestinian? So there's a lot of, it's complicated. And I think the biggest challenge I have is just getting people to pick up the book. And then for the people who pick it up because of the rep and they want to see themselves, to understand that I can only share my experience and it might not look like yours.
We have a few audience questions. I want to start off with one that is one of my favorite, and I don't remember if I ended up asking it in my preparation questions, but it's, how did you come up with the title of your debut? Was it a working title? Was it something that, someone suggested? Maya, do you want to start? I think you're muted.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Sorry about that. Okay, so for my title, it was actually one that I very deliberately thought up myself. This was the second title that I thought up on my own. And my original title was Kismet, actually. A little bit of a coincidence. So I decided to change my title because I saw another book name also called Kismet, not Kismet Connection, but I thought that was a bit funny. So I decided to change it to something that was like, I'm a big fan of like Sarah Dessen, and she has these like phrase titles. And When It All Syncs Up was very in line with that. And I was like, oh, that sounds cute. I had a couple other options, and I ultimately went with this one. And I was just very lucky that my publisher decided to keep it, because if people don't know, who aren't in publishing or an author, there's a lot of the time where you have your own title and your publisher decides to go with a different one. So just keeping that in mind for anyone who is going to be going into publishing a book.
When I first started drafting the book, I actually had a placeholder title that was The Haunting of Jade Wynn. And that's just calling back many different, horror movies, horror books. That's, the haunting of some white person's name. And I so really wanted a haunting of this very specific, Vietnamese girl that I was talking about. But as I was actually drafting the book, I realized, there are many more ghosts in this story than just whatever is, haunting Jade, whoever is haunting Jade. And so that's kind of where the title was born. She is a haunting, because there's many women, many girls who've lived in this house in Vietnam that have either perished there or have survived there. And so I kind of wanted to call back to, all the different women and all the different girls in Jade's life that sort of touches her story in some way.
So for Kismet Connection, that started off as a placeholder title. There's a Bollywood movie called Kismet Connection that has nothing to do with my book. Absolutely no overlap ever, but I feel like I need to repeat that because there sometimes are blurred lines there. So there's no connection, but I was watching that movie when I first started drafting this book, and I thought, oh, this is cute. I like it. And then as I started drafting the book, I realized that a big part of my brand, like we were talking about earlier, are Indian American characters who are just locked in this in-between diaspora space that they're trying to make their own. They don't necessarily want to fit into one or the other. They're trying to do something with this middle ground. So I thought, for all my books, including Kismet Connection and my second book, which comes out in 2025, I want one Hindi word and one English word in my title in an alliteration, just to really make it clear that you can have both. And somehow I've got 3 books with title like schemes like that. So Kismet Connection ended up staying with that mentality in mind, and my publisher was really on board with that idea as well. So here we are.
My title story is not very deep. So I had an original title and my publisher made me change mine. And I was trying to think of new titles, and I'm a big BTS fan, and there is a song called Life Goes On. And in the chorus, it goes like an echo in the forest. And I thought, what if it's not in a forest, but in a city? And then that's how I came up with an echo in the city.
I really expected my publisher to change my title because there are other books with the same title. But the reason I had chosen it is because Jessie says it 3 different times in the story. And I thought that for each time she says it in the story, it sort of connects to a different theme in the story, you know, something more than just being friends, something more than just the life I had before, something more happening than I expected to happen or whatever. And I just thought it fit. I'm not one for titles or coming up with great, amazing titles, but I guess they decided that it worked and they kept it. And I think it fits because it's like soft, like the story's soft and whatever. And yeah, I would have been interested to see what they could have come up with, but they didn't come up with anything else.
And then my final question is inspired by the fact that I've recently seen so many TikToks which are like, who's Beyonce's Beyonce? And so I would love to know for you all, who is an author that you admire or an author that you're really excited about, you know, one or the other. Who's your Beyonce is my question. KX, you want to start?
So this is a bit of a departure from the panel because this is actually an adult author, but 2 different authors. One is Lisa See, who wrote Snowflower and the Secret Fan. And I read this book when I was way too young. I think I was 11 years old. And there were certain scenes where I was like, I have no idea what is happening here, but I'll just call it friendship. And that book just left a huge imprint on me. It's about Chinese history and about a time when women were very marginalized. And actually, fun fact is I ended up working for Lisa See as an assistant later on when I was older. So I had her sign my very worn copies of Snowflower and the Secret Fan. The other author who, you know, is just like my all-time who I want to be when I grow up is Min Jin Lee, who wrote Pachinko. This is the book that taught me like what writing can accomplish and, you know, how you can really like bring history alive through narrative. And so there's one book that I've always wanted to write about Chinese history and about, you know, a multi-generational story. And that book inspired me like, okay, now I can actually start writing this because I have a blueprint of what a story like this can look like.
I've joked before that I want to be the Arab Jenny Han. So I've got her book right here. I just like how it's just dreamy, romantic, coming of age themes. But I also really admire Lynn Painter's young adult novels. I loved this book, as many people do. And another favorite, which isn't less known, is this book called Brave New Girl. I just love the voice of the main character in this story. And then another book, one more, last one, is Prep by Curtis Sittenfeld. I loved the day-to-day. I like really character-driven stories where you get to really be like a close POV to the main character with always a side of romance. So that's sort of my brand.
I'll give it 2. I really look up to 2 big Indian American authors or Pakistani American, just or South Asian diaspora authors in general. My all-time favorite, also a slight deviation, is an adult romance author, Sajni Patel. And I love her books so much. I want to be her when I grow up, primarily also in terms of her writing, because she is so big on having this incredible romance novel with all of these cultural and like community factors influencing the romance. And she does not shy away from talking about the not so great parts of our community, but also talking about the really great parts. And I think it takes a certain level of courage to do that in any book, especially a romance novel where people are coming in expecting something really cute and fluffy and also get some really strong themes in there. So I really love her writing style and her courage in writing those books. And that's a lot of what I write as well. And of course, all-time favorite, Saba Tahir and All My Rage. Pretty much, I read that book quite a few years ago, but it absolutely changed the way I look at the diaspora writing experience, how these lived experiences are portrayed and executed on paper, what voice we use, what do we want to accomplish with the stories that we tell. Saba Tahir does that incredibly well, and I can only hope to be as good of a writer as her someday.
I also have two Beyoncés. The first is Emily X.R. Pan, who wrote The Astonishing Color of After and An Arrow to the Moon, just because, just incredible writer who writes very emotional stories with beautiful prose, and just everything about her writing just touches me in a very special way. And also, The Astonishing Color of After is also the first book that I picked up that was like, contemporary Asian main character, visiting home, and it just spoke to me. My second Beyonce is Andrew Joseph White, who is a writer that is doing amazing horror stories centering trans characters fighting against these systems that oppress them, and he's just amazing. Please be my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, I think The Astonishing Color of After is like the first book where I actively started to collect like the different editions. I'm just so in love with that book and Emily. And the final question I want to have, or that I want to close out this panel with, is about debuts. So I'd love to hear from everyone what other 2023 debuts you have on your TBR, or if you've also already read them and loved them and want to like plug it out. Jackie, do you want to start? Okay.
Sorry, I wanted to grab it. Ever Since by Elena Bruzas is one of my favorite 2023 debuts. It comes with a lot of trigger warnings, so just be careful, but it's so beautifully written, and I can't stop thinking about it.
The book that I'm really, really excited about, and I actually read, is I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast Is Me by Jameson Shea. Just amazing, dark ballerinas making deals with eldritch gods. Like, you have to pick it up. So good.
I have two. I am so excited for Hannah Sawyer's All the Fighting Parts. I will scream about that book till the cows come, and it's not even out yet. So that one, and also Paige Powers' The Bowery Boyfriend Club. It's one of the first trans rom-coms to come out, and I think it is so incredible. I've already bought it. It's on my shelf, and I'm just so excited to read both of those books.
So the book that I just finished reading that is incredible and hilarious is Shanghai Immortal, but I'm trying to find the author's name. I'm so bad with names. And A.Y. Chow. Amazing book. It's like set in Shanghai. It's very, so I feel like most historical novels with fantasy are a bit more grim, like mine are very dark, but this book really captures the humor element, which I appreciated.
Okay, so I'm just going to chime in with mine. It's Everyone's Thinking It by Alima Otomi. I'm super excited to read it. And it's basically like a Shakespearean retelling. There's a lot of gossip in a boarding school type of situation. A lot of romantic secrets are revealed, and I love Alima, so please check it out.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining me. Please pick up all of the books to everyone who is watching and all future viewers. I put all the links for the books in the description box below. So definitely add them, request them, read them, do all of the things. And I would love to thank everyone for joining me on this panel. Thank you for all the questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for everyone joining me and spending the time together today.
Thank you.
Thank you.